Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Grierson. I am the senior U.S. critic for Screen International. It gives me great pleasure to do this Q&A this afternoon. First, I want to introduce the two stars of the film, Owen Campbell and Charlie Tahan. And please welcome to the stage also the director of SUPERDARK TIMES, Kevin Phillips. All right, so welcome, guys. Congratulations on the movie, first of all. First question I want to ask is of Kevin, because the screenwriters for this movie you'd worked with at least one other time. You did a short film with them beforehand. How this story kind of came about, your own interest in doing this type of project, so kind of the origins of where this came from.
Do I need this, or? Yeah. You got it. So I've told this story a lot of times, so I'll try to be brief because Owen told me that I'm long-winded just the other day. So forgive me if that's the case. But so the screenwriters, Ben Collins and Luke Petrowski, I've known for quite a while. Ben particularly, I went to college with at Savannah College of Art and Design. And so I've known Ben, and Ben, his best bud, for like 12 years. He moved out to Los Angeles about the same time that I did, and we've been always trying to figure out a film to work on together, a feature. We worked a lot in college, and we just liked each other's sensibilities. So the feature idea for SUPERDARK TIMES came first. Ben had a dream about 6 years ago, and he texted me in the morning, and he's like, "Hey, let's go for a walk. I have this idea that I think could be something. I want to tell you about it." And at that point in time, this dream was like basically the middle of the film. It was basically friends from in high school messing around with a samurai sword in the woods, and somebody, tragedy occurs. Somebody dies, and basically the film from there would be about the guilt that forms and the rifts that form between these friendships. He got really excited as he was talking to me about it, and he's like, "I think we're onto something here. I think this is it. I think I should write this, and I think you should direct this." And he went off, and he took 5 days, and then he procured a first draft. And I was immediately enticed by the material. I mean, I liked Ben's writing very much. He and Luke are they're very cinematic in their writing. They really understand rhythm, and they have a beautiful sense for detail, and it really just speaks to me. So basically from there, Luke Petrowski came in, and a second draft was made about maybe like 2 months later, and that's when the film really started to take form. It's when the characters really began to take shape in the way that we see it today. About like 7 or 8 drafts later, and like 6 years later, we actually went on to be given the chance to make the film. And in part, that was due to making a short film that we did in the winter of 2014. So we made this in the winter of 2015. So basically, we did a short called Too Cool for School, which exists in the same cinematic universe as SUPERDARK TIMES, basically as a kind of a point of sale piece. At that point, we already had a treatment in place, and we already had, a pretty well fleshed out script. And so we just kind of needed to prove ourselves. And that went to Cannes at Critics Week and did well. And the following winter, we're upstate New York making this film.
And was it always the idea that this would be set in the mid-1990s? Because I'm curious, there's a couple reasons why it might be advantageous to do the 1990s, but I was curious what the thought process was.
Totally. It was always pre-Columbine. That was important for us thematically, as well as narratively. And we really wanted to make an authentic film, and we thought it would be responsible for us in that sense as well to basically mine our pasts, as high schoolers, as kids growing up in the 90s, and draw from that. So yeah, it kind of worked for us in myriad of ways. It worked for us thematically, it worked for us narratively, and it worked for us cinematically in terms of being able to craft a story pre-internet, pre-cell phone.
And before I kind of bring Charlie and Owen into this conversation, how did the casting work? Because in some ways, both of these characters are in love with the same girl, but there's also this really close friendship, this kind of love affair almost between the two guys. And so I have to assume that the chemistry was important and finding two actors that could work together. So in terms of casting and looking for these two characters, how did these guys come into play?
So we cast all out of New York. This is basically a New York movie in a certain sense. I wanted to cast out of New York. It was easy for production as well, since we didn't have to like fly people in, etc. But I wanted that texture and that characterization that you could find from locals. Owen and Charlie, Charlie's from New Jersey, Owen's from New York, and so yeah, Jersey, exactly, right? Yes, Jersey as well, totally. Everybody from Jersey likes one another. I've noticed this, yeah. And so. We were a humble movie, right? And basically we did a lot of prep in making this film, but the money for the actual production didn't come into play until a couple weeks out from actually shooting. And so at that point when it did, we just had to like kind of pull the trigger, and it was a bit of a fever pitch, So we had the benefit of casting with our casting agents, Susan Shotmaker and Lois Drabkin out of New York, who were incredible, and they brought us wonderful talent, like a bunch of kids that I had to see in a very short amount of time. And so, I mean, phenomenal talent right here, and I was blessed to find them, honestly, just blessed. And could not imagine this movie without them. Owen and Charlie came in on the same day. Owen came in first, Charlie came in last. Charlie read for Josh. He did not want to read for Zach, and I respected that. I cast Charlie first. The character for Zach, given that he's on screen 100% of the time, I really needed to sit with that. But at the same time, I didn't, the character of Josh was of equal weight and importance for me. But when Charlie did his read, I had no notes. He told me later that he thought he totally flunked it because I didn't say anything to him. But when he left, I turned to my...
You just had a very serious face on. I didn't,
I had given him my glasses to do the reading.
You were very nice.
There's a picture of me actually like in the audition, and I'm this close to the screen, just like watching him. But he left, and I turned to my producers and to Susan and Lois, and I'm like, yeah, we're building the film around him entirely. And then right thereafter, I cast Owen. And the thing is, when Owen came in and did his first reading, I pretty much had him pinned. But he came in, gratefully to do a second reading for me, and he sold it. Now, the thing is, though, I didn't have time to do chemistry reads. So I cast entirely on, just a hope and a prayer that what I was able to derive from them, these two kids and the rest of our cast, Elizabeth Cappuccino, Max Talisman, and Sawyer Barth as well, in the reads, that I hoped that they would get along with one another and they'd get along with me. I remember driving upstate to Kingston, and I was just, anxious, to say the least. But given that, they're not only exceptionally professionally talented people, they're wonderful human beings too, all of them. Everybody just got along wonderfully. So,
for Owen and Charlie, one of the things that I'm struck by in the movie, both times I've watched it, is that, these guys are supposed to be best friends, and sometimes that's hard to convey in a movie. This is not a problem, though, in SUPERDARK TIMES. These guys feel like they've been friends sort of forever. And I'm curious, especially because, as Kevin said, there wasn't time to do sort of those chemistry tests and those chemistry reads. Was it a process in terms of sort of figuring out like the kind of the shorthand of, we've been friends for a long time, how does that feel, how does that look, what's the rapport like, how did you guys kind of develop, I guess, that chemistry between the two of you?
Well, what's not to love about Charlie?
Me and Owen are a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
And
so we hit it off very quickly, but also the script was written by best friends. and everyone making the film went to college together. So everybody knew each other very well, and everyone could identify, everyone from the director to the first AC could identify what parts of these characters were the friends that they grew up with. And so everyone had suggestions and ideas, and then the skeleton that was Ben and Luke's script did all the work, because they read like best friends.
It was just a really good vibe, I guess, from everyone. I think that's you're doing. Everyone was kind of friends, like you said. So it made me a lot more comfortable to kind of go off and do some like weird things with it.
Totally. I mean, we really, I went in there with a certain ethos and how I hoped filmmaking could be, and how it had operated for me up to this point. And that was basically surround yourself with people that you love and trust, and allow for it to be a collaborative medium, which it is when it functions best. And so I think, and I could, they were very comfortable, as was everybody else, in the setting that we created, where we were open to influence and inspiration as much as possible. And I think that just kind of, paved the way for, just the depth of performance that they were able to kind of bring to the screen.
Owen, as Kevin was saying, that Zach is kind of like that character who's there on every page, every scene of the movie. In terms of kind of being the centerpiece of the movie, what was sort of your conception of who this guy is? Because as you'll discover, your friend who you think you know is going to go through this kind of dark transformation. In a lot of ways, you're actually the audience's sort of surrogate. We're sort of discovering this movie as your character is discovering it. In terms of conceiving the character, sort of thinking about who this guy was, is this drawing from yourself and your own experiences, or is this a very kind of different person than you yourself are?
I mean, even when I don't have the ability to totally invent a person. I think some people might be better at that, but I always try to draw, even when their mannerisms would be very different from mine. I'm trying to draw from something that seems familiar. So there were things that I could draw from, but I also have when you're living with a script and you're living with people, it's really easy for the character to just sort of start inventing for you. So yeah, I didn't really sit down and decide, okay, what does Zach think about this and that, and but he's in the script. I mean, a lot of that work is just done for you in the script. If you're just honest with the way he behaves in the script, and then a lot of it is me, and then a lot of it is just what we were able to invent in these improvs, like what seems like it would fit rhythmically with everyone else. When Charlie's doing this and Max is doing that, okay, it's like, how can you distinguish yourself in that line? I think of the bridge shot, and there are these four characters, and of course the footprints for the characters are very solid. They're in the script, but then you just have to listen to that, and then listen to how the other actors are interpreting those footprints, and then just sort of try to figure out where you fit in. And we did a lot of work together. There were a bunch of group scenes at the beginning we did before it sort of disappeared into becoming a lot about Zach's interpersonal journey. And that's really helpful, because that just informs how you behave with the group, and then you just keep doing that.
If I can just add, there's something really interesting that I realized recently, was that, this film was very pre-visualized, and there was a very, discernible aesthetic that I wanted to bring to it from an early onset. But it wasn't until meeting Owen and actually working with Owen and seeing what he was bringing to this character, and just the I don't know, I say emotion that he was pulling from it, that I don't know, it's interesting because I was originally approaching the movie from a more objective perspective, a little more like of an omniscient kind of perspective. But the way he rendered Zach, I think in collaboration with the rest of the filmmakers and just on screen, it made me start to approach it in a much more subjective way, which for me was, it was the juice for me. It was like everything, it basically, his quality of performance and what he brought to that character, there's a dimensionality there that, basically like kind of formed the perspective of the film in a new way for me that I didn't anticipate.
Charlie, Kevin mentioned the fact that you wanted to just read for one character, not both. What was it about Josh that you felt? Did you sort of feel like you had a sort of a beat on that character, or what was it about him that made you want to just read for that character?
First of all, pardon my voice. I'm a little sick. I don't even really remember. Yeah, I guess I just could. I think I understood him a little bit. Well, not necessarily, not really relate to him. But I think we're both a little. I can get cranky. And I think a lot of that, like stuff at the beginning with us, like that's like kind of how we are a lot of the time. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really remember why. I just I didn't really want. I feel like it would be probably because it would be weird to read for two characters and not and like divide your attention or something.
I asked Charlie, and on the phone, I'm just like, you only wonder. After I cast him as Josh, I called him up and just basically introduced myself, because I didn't talk to him at all during the audition. And I like, you want to read for Josh and only Josh? He's like, yeah, that's what interested me. And I said, okay, and that was that.
And I understand what you're saying, Charlie, about it's not like you want to necessarily relate to that character, but I think what's important in the movie, and I think what you bring to the movie, is a sense of we feel like we understand that kid, but then he goes in a direction where we kind of lose him in a certain way, and we don't know where that person went that we thought that we knew. And I think that the ability to kind of create a sense where you still have empathy for that character and worry about that character, it seems like an important quality for an actor in that role.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I just think, oh my God, that got very loud. Yeah, I guess it's just the character spoke to me a little bit more. Yeah, about finding a way to have people, care about him. It's a slow thing. I had no idea what I was gonna, what it was gonna be like before we started shooting. I never do. But as I met Kevin and everyone, and the crew, there was kind of this sense of humor, I guess, and I think me and Josh have a similar sense of humor. And that's really the only thing I think I thought of to try to get people to not root for him, but care about him a little bit.
If I can tag in.
Yes.
It was really important for me to approach this film with empathy, in hoping to create authentic characters and authentic situations that could be relatable, regardless of how insane the situation gets. I think people ask often about the humor in the film and how to balance out the humor with the oppressive bleakness of the movie, and I think it was really important to us naturally in creating that authenticity, such as in life. It's multidimensional, and these are kids, and kids are naturally funny, as are people, and like this type of stuff comes out in sometimes the strangest times. And so in effort to kind of be true to that, I think Charlie, for instance, was able to bring his own sense of dimensionality to the character. He was able to kind of pull from that and see that, oh, there's a lot happening, and there's a lot of nuance and detail-oriented stuff that we're working with here. And what he brought to the table was, a level of level of subtlety that, I couldn't have anticipated ever, and that's what really, that's just one thing that really drew me to Charlie as Josh. And the thing is, he kind of nailed that even early on, though. You kind of nailed it in the audition. Yeah.
I also really like to watch Charlie develop the Joshisms. And it started when he got the glasses, and he just perfected the glasses push first.
He wouldn't take the glasses off.
Yeah.
The
A
entire
lot of
shoot.
that's from Kevin.
Yeah.
I've come to realize.
Am I always doing this?
No, not at all. Just your,
How many times have
your
I done
thinking,
this?
your thinking faces. I don't know. He had a sometimes with scripts they give you like a lookbook, which is like slideshow kind of like light. I guess it just to show like lighting and tone.
References and all that stuff.
Yeah, for like investors and stuff. And usually, it doesn't.
I'm glad they gave it to
Too
you.
much. I know. I am too. Usually it doesn't matter at all. But like, he had just this picture of. I always forget what it is. We've done
It's
all
from
these
Persona.
interviews.
There's an image of the child from Persona, Ingmar Bergman's Persona, and that was in there.
Scrawny
for Josh.
kid
Yeah.
with glasses and like a kind of crooked mouth, and I was
For
like,
whatever
oh, I
reason-
know kids sort of like that.
He just pulled out. He pulled it, and yeah.
But the glasses, Kevin gave me his glasses in the audition, and I really liked wearing the glasses. It made me feel cool.
Kevin, one thing I want to ask about was also just the look of the film. We had some questions that the audience kind of wrote in beforehand, and this is one of the ones I was also curious about. In terms of the decision of how to shoot this thing, I'm assuming I think I read it was digital but shot with 35 millimeter lenses. It's widescreen, I think. In terms of just the overall how you shot and the strategy behind why you shot the way you did, I'd love to hear about that.
We shot digital on a red camera, but it's correct 35 millimeter anamorphic though. Now I work as a cinematographer professionally, and I have for like 12 years. I brought on a different cinematographer to shoot this film, so I could better focus as a director, and kind of tend to all like the endless aspects of directing. I brought on a great close friend named Eli Bourne, who I have a very spiritual relationship with, and we have a shorthand. We created a vocabulary very early on. Like I said, we kind of went in with a very pre-visualized idea of how this should be, and I really wanted to shoot it in a very precise, detail-oriented, blocking-intensive kind of way, which is a hard way to shoot naturally, but I'm ambitious, and I felt that this story, the rhythms in the script and my natural rhythm, for me, it just called for that. And at the end of the day, for me, cinema is rhythm and tone entirely. That's how I understand it now, and I think that's how it's always going to be. But who knows? But in order to do service to that, I was drawing a lot of influence from films that I watched growing up, which I recall like the anamorphic format, the aesthetic of that. And I recalled, that type of blocking where the camera, every placement of the camera in accordance to the subject, elicits a certain emotion. And I wanted to be expressive. I wanted to be restrained and formal, but expressive. And so it was kind of a mix of all of these things. We were shooting upstate New York in the winter, with kids. Charlie at the time was 17. He had a guardian on set and stuff, and we only had so much time because we were a small film. And so, we had to be as precise as possible, not only to make our schedule, but, just to do service to the aesthetic that we wanted to approach the movie with.
And this is, you've done shorts before this, but this is your feature debut. It's inevitable, of course, that when someone makes their first film, journalists and critics will compare it to other films and say, oh, this reminds me of this, reminds me of this. Obviously working with people in high school, death involved in it, there's a lot of films that people can think of. Is that, when you are starting out and making sort of a first feature, are you trying to resist the comparisons to things that might come up? Are you trying to, like, I don't want this to be like Stand By Me, I don't want this to be like River's Edge, or how do you kind of embrace or not embrace the inevitable comparisons that will come up?
Stand By Me was a staple for me. My writer Ben Collins never saw Stand By Me, and still to this day has not seen Stand By Me. But he's, my writers Ben and Luke are enormous Stephen King fans. They've read like as much of his books as possible. This movie's compared to a lot of things, one of which is Donnie Darko, which I've only seen once when I was growing up. So that was never a place for influence for us. Rather, we were drawing comparisons to filmmakers like Lynn Ramsey and David Fincher, John Demme, Paul Thomas Anderson, Steven Spielberg. We were pulling it, our influences ran the gamut. We were pulling from as many places as possible.
Who was the Japanese anime director that you guys were always?
The movie Akira was like huge for us in a lot of ways. And I actually sent it to Charlie early on in production. I'm just like, just watch this.
I didn't watch it until we were done, actually.
Fair, it's fine. So the point is that, we always wanted...
Great movie, though.
Yeah, incredible.
It rules.
Yeah, of course, it defined a culture and a generation, But, honestly, like, we always wanted to make a unique film. That was really important for us. We wanted to, we're lovers of art, and we wanted to step in there and kind of, as much as possible, embrace the eclecticism of the medium, but create a signature of sorts. And so, we proudly wear our influences on our sleeve, but we pulled from a lot of different places. I reckon, people are going to, to cite Stand By Me, like, sure, by all means, I'll gladly take it. I'll gladly take whatever you throw, I think. It's fine.
So, Owen, at least professionally, you've been working on film and television for about 10 years now, something like that. I'm assuming the acting was something that you were interested in from a very early age. Was it a family member? Was it a particular film? I'm curious, like, what the path was in terms of acting, performing. Have you always kind of been sort of a showboat even as a kid? Like, where did it come from?
I just want to make movies. I really don't care what I do on the movie. It was, I think, the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark. When I saw someone give us the box set when I was like really little, and they have these really well documented making ofs, and I watched that and I just thought, well, fuck, I'll do that.
No cursing. We had a rule.
Oh, right.
Fudge.
And even at a young age, did you feel like not only I want to do that, that seemed like a path? Because a lot of kids will see like something and be like, oh, it'd be great to do movies, but I can't do that.
I'm really lucky. I grew up in New York, and my parents' friends were all artists, so it didn't seem wild, this idea that you could be an artist. My parents had both done art, still do art, but and my dad, he would write pitches for documentaries. So like there were people around who were doing creative things, but I think the most supportive thing they did was just buy VHS, like mini DV cameras. I think that is what made it feel accessible. Is this idea that like, okay, you want to be a movie maker, which was really, that's what I wanted to do when I was a little kid. Here's a mini DV camera, and go out and make a movie, and you do, and that's actually how I ended up acting professionally. Was just that my aunt wanted to make a short film, and we just made one in my bedroom with my dad as a zombie, and I kill him. And she showed it at her birthday, and someone saw it when I was like 13 and said, "Oh, we need a kid in our movie. Do you want to be in the movie?" And so and then you're fucked. I mean, you're fudged.
Two quick anecdotes for this. 2.5. I mean, so every day on set, when we would nail a scene of some sort, particularly an exciting one, like I remember Owen would like kind of be very giddy and jumping around, and he'd be like, "We're making a movie," and I loved that. And so these two, like I was saying earlier, they inspired us in so many ways beyond just like their performance on screen. They brought so much to the film itself. And one of these things was, for instance, like it was Owen's suggestion that Zach has a cast. And that happened like 3 days before we started shooting. We were like sitting down, we were talking about the characters, and we were talking about the scene where like Owen like lays into this wall right after Daryl's death, and Owen's like, if I like really hit this wall, like my hand is gonna be like maybe broken, right? And Ben and I were like, okay. And he's like, so maybe I have like a cast, Wouldn't that be like cool? Because like then at the end, when Josh like comes down at me with the sword, I can like block it with the cast, and we're like, yes, exactly. And Ben ran out to go talk to our producer, and he's like, we need a cast, like that's what we need. And immediately, like I'm thinking, oh my God, and it's got to be a pink cast for every reason, and how amazing that would look, and so it just we allowed ourselves to
ran out
just
of
be.
blue.
Exactly, for that line, if anything. We allowed ourselves to be as inspired as possible by these tremendous talents that were coming to the screen, because these kids just wanted to make films. And Charlie comes up to me, like, this might embarrass you, but I think this is brilliant. He comes up to me like the day before filming. And this is just after all the cast met one another, and he's like, hey, can I talk to you? And I'm like, totally. And he's like, yeah, so all these kids they're great. And I'm like, yeah, we're really blessed. And he's like, yeah, they all have like their own methods, right? And I'm like, yeah, it's really amazing. They're all coming from very different backgrounds, and they're all bringing something individual to the page. It's great. And he's like, yeah, I don't have like a method. And I'm like, all right. And he's like, what I do.
You sound like such a dick.
No, it's great. He's like, what I like to do. Listen. He's like, what I like to do is I like to just, imagine what would make a good movie. And I just do that. And I, as a director on this movie, I could not have been more happy about that. And I just embraced that. And I don't know. I mean, this is like a high compliment, Charlie. I think it was fantastic.
Love you, Kev.
So Charlie, you've also been working professionally for about 10 years now, and very early on in your career, you're in this big movie, I Am Legend, and you're...
Oh, yes.
Yes, and I'm curious, at a young age, being in a huge movie like that, did you feel like, I want to continue doing this? Did it seem like, well, that was fun, and maybe I'll do another one of these? Because a lot of very young actors will be cast in something really big like that, and then you just never hear from them again for a lot of different reasons. So for you, what was that kind of journey like?
No, I think when I started doing it, and I got really excited about it when I was little. I guess I would be like, oh, I'm gonna do this for the rest of my life. And then school started getting hard. Started getting really hard. Like math, math. It's like crazy. But yeah, no, I always had fun doing it. It was, yeah.
And you talked before, Kevin, about this idea of having humor in the piece, and that's important. And I definitely understand what you're saying. But also, I think what's interesting about this film is that even though there are ominous things that happen at the very start of the film, if you don't know the plot line of this film, you don't know where it's going. There are tonal shifts that happen even in the third act. Was that, in terms of that shift, was that always there even in that first 5-day draft, or did that kind of develop as it was written?
The inciting incident was always at its place, and like the veer off in the third act always was there. It was our intention to always make a quiet movie, and I mean that in the most kind of like universal sort of way, sonically, but as well as like visually and as well as emotionally. And we wanted to kind of be able to exist within those like quiet moments amidst like the moments that are otherwise relatively loud, and really kind of have the audience be able to fall into that. Like, so when Daryl dies, being as, how to say, loud as Daryl is throughout the film, like when he dies, we really wanted there to be like a void in the soundscape. We wanted the audience to feel that, to the point of, if he's obnoxious, but when he's gone, you don't, that quality's gone from the film as well, and like you just feel that much more. The opening scene itself, again, that scene for me, it always existed as an omen and a metaphor for everything to come. It was a tonal, note for the audience as well, to kind of basically sit in and get a sense of how the rest of the film will feel, but also, thematically, kind of like place that up right up in the front, as to, in a way, what to expect, or also kind of, maybe what not to expect.
And this is for anybody up here, but watching the film, it's not like the movie has a message or that some sort of point that it's trying to make. I think there's a lot of themes you can kind of read into it. But one of the things that I couldn't help it while watching, I was thinking about the way young guys are in terms of like being together and the mistakes that they make, and also being not ready yet for the adult world, because they face some incredibly difficult, harrowing things because of the death of this classmate of theirs and then what they do afterwards. And I guess I'm just curious if that was part of it for you in terms of what the movie feels like it's about, or the themes that you talk about, Kevin, in terms of what an audience derives from what they're watching.
It's really hard for me to actually give a synopsis of this movie. Like, I flounder all the time. People ask, like, tell us what this movie's about, and I'm like, I really struggle because there are many other people that are better suited for that. Like, for me, this movie's male everything. It's all about masculinity, but it's also about youth, and it's about how fragile all of that is, especially in the face of tragedy, and how easily distorted that can all get. So themes of toxic masculinity, and as well as guilt and how corrosive that could be, as well as friendship, and the effects of friendship, that guilt can or tragedy rather, can play in creating a rift there, and what all that means to a sense of identity for a young person, particularly a young boy. These are all things that we were really tackling quite heavily. So, like I said, I have a hard time talking about what this movie's about. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if for the actors, for you guys, if there's anything in terms of themes or things that matter to you in terms of, or maybe that's not the thing that you even worry about. You're worried about playing that character.
I certainly was not
honest.
worried when we were filming it.
Yeah.
And I didn't even pick up on all this. I kind of knew it was there. We sort of talked a bit about it. But on the day-to-day, we were just talking more about the heartbeat of the story. Like, what are these people going through? How are these people behaving with one another? And then when I sat down to watch it for the first time, suddenly it clicked. Like, oh, that's what Kevin's been talking about this whole time. This investigation of just both like fraternity, like that brotherhood, but then also the cruelty of like male status games, and like, I'm gonna be more powerful than you, from the beginning on, like with their friends, to all the way to like when it's gonna be like, I'm gonna exercise power over these girls and over you and over what yeah.
And I didn't it's a slow, like I don't really have a big feel for what kind of stuff like that there is at the beginning. Like when I read the script, I had a totally different idea of what the story was. Like adding on to what Kevin says, it's like with masculinity, it's it shows how crazy and stupid and awful boys can be, especially around girls at that age, and they just don't understand it, and that's why it ends with Kappa, ends with Elizabeth Cappuccino. We call her
Cappy.
Cappy. And it ends with her because she was the only one that had nothing to do with it, and she got
It's scarred on her neck.
she got cut up with a sword. So I think it's important that it ended with her.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Congratulations on the
Thank
movie.
you very much. Thanks so much,
And
guys.
thank you all very much for being here.